Lovely. So thank you for your time, Lauren, Leo, and Joshua. So I'll just kind of give you a bit of a whistle stop tour, but I think I just want you to know that I'm really happy for you to ask me anything. And I will give you my most truthful and honest answer based on my experience. So it's not to say that, this is like the way it is for everybody, but it's just the way that I've navigated it. I think it's useful to hear how it's panned out for different people. And if there's anything that you want to know specifically about, then also let me know. Like I'll give it my best shot, but I also might not know the answer. So just to kind of give you like a real quick thing about Outlandish, we have been going for 11 years this year. We started off, we've always been work owned and controlled, but we did start off as a legal liability partnership. Is that what LLP stands for? I can't remember. Basically, but it was always it was always worker owned, but it's kind of the way that it's developed in a kind of structural way is that previously where people were freelancers, now we have people that are employees who are the members, the worker owners, but we also have freelancers involved in Outlandish as well. The reason for that is because, especially in the tech sector, there are lots and lots of freelancers, lots of people who work on side projects or passion projects or just have their own clients, so they're free to carry on working on those projects. And then as and when we need them, or as and when they need us, we collaborate. So there's kind of three concentric circles to Outlandish. Those people, we call them the collaborators, are on the kind of outer circle. We've been working with some collaborators for, well, longer than I've been at Outlandish, which is nearly 6 years. And normally when people get in touch and want to work with us, they will start working as a freelancer. After 3 months, you can, after I think it's 70 days of work, you can apply to become an Outlander. And that just basically means that you're making a commitment to Outlandish. And in turn, you get kind of, if you have the same skills as a collaborator, you get priority over work because there has to be some sort of incentive. And then in the middle are the members. So there are currently 8 members, and you can apply to become a member after like 200 days of work or something like that. And the thing is that there isn't, this has kind of brought up some difference in Outlandish. I'm kind of on the perception that opinion that we should have more incentives for people to become members, because otherwise you can have like lots of benefits, but maybe not the responsibility. Whereas other people think it should be pretty similar across. We obviously have like employee benefits like pension and like paid annual leave and that kind of thing, which you can't get as a freelancer. But we don't really differentiate much between freelancers and members. So you can still feed into decision making in the business. You can still come to training. You still get paid to like learn new skills and that kind of thing. Outlandish, as in terms of like what we deliver, we've always delivered tech. I usually describe it as building useful things for nice people. It's mostly data-led projects. That's kind of our bread and butter and the thing that we enjoy most from a technical perspective. We create campaigns, kind of digital campaigns for people like Greenpeace and the NEU. But also in recent years, we've started a new stream of service, which we practice a lot internally, which is more around building openness, understanding and trust within teams. And the reason that we started to do that is because lots of people were like, oh, I've heard that you do kind of, like feedback training or sociocracy, which I'll talk a little bit in a minute. You do training around, or sorry, not training, but you practice it within Outlandish. Like, how does that work? And we started to do it informally, but then we realized, oh, this is quite in demand. And we always come at stuff from a kind of practitioner basis rather than a consultant, like this is the way to do it basis. So that's also just been really interesting working with teams. We've done workshops with SUMA, for example, around consent-based decision making. I'm also just really aware of like when I've talked for 5 minutes and no one else has. Does anyone have like any questions so far? to break up my voice.
No, not yet, not from me.
Okay, Leo and Joshua, if you have, then just unmute, but I guess I'll carry on going. In terms of how I got into Outlandish, I had no technical experience. I also would not consider myself a technical person now, although when I say that openly in the office, some of my colleagues are like, you are, but I'm not a developer. I've learned nearly everything from a kind of technical perspective on the job. I would say for the role that I have, which is everything that isn't design or development, I would say that I just give it a go and see how it works. So I do loads of stuff. I do project management, I do some finance stuff, I help design new services for Outlandish to deliver. I do a lot of facilitation, I sell stuff, I do the building out stuff around kind of building openness, understanding and transparency, and trust. I do a lot of the kind of internal people focused stuff. So I do lots of stuff at Outlandish, basically. I think being a generalist, this is kind of something that I want to bring up in kind of challenges. Being a generalist is a blessing and a curse, I think. I think for a long time, I kind of did stuff that I didn't really enjoy, like a lot of admin stuff that I just knew needed to get done. But it meant that I wasn't really focusing on the stuff that I enjoyed. So I've kind of got better at that in the past couple of years. But I was a little bit too scattergun, I think, at the start. And I think it's kind of, you know, just learning like what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy and what you're good at and not so good at. But I think I'm trying to move to a point where I am specializing in a couple of things, but still got my eye on other stuff. Inevitably, one of those things will be project management, which Outlandish needs at the moment, and I enjoy. I think I'd probably like a holiday from clients like every couple of months, just so I just don't have to deal with the kind of responsibility, or maybe it's even the kind of urgency that working with clients sometimes brings. But I've kind of been trying to think about if I could specialize in something new, but I don't know what I don't know, so I'm just still keeping my eye out for stuff. I was really lucky with Outlandish because I used to work with somebody who had moved to Outlandish, and she knew that I was desperate to get a new job, so she phoned me and she said, do you still want a new job? And I was like, yes. And she said, okay, I've got something that I think you might like. And I didn't know what it was, but I was so desperate to leave, so I was like, I'll do it. And luckily it was Outlandish, but don't know what I would have, actually I know what I would have done if it was in like a bank or an arms company. I would have been like, oh no, now I'm unemployed. But I was just really, really lucky to get into Outlandish, and like something that Joshua said around, you know, there not really being anything in the local area, that like I felt sad when I heard you say that, because I think that co-ops are great. And whenever we get people who email us, we get a lot of speculative emails of like, can I come and work with you? And the thing that I personally always look for is somebody who's genuinely interested in cooperatives. So I don't know, and also this is completely unsolicited advice because you didn't ask this at all, but I don't know if it would be if it would be open, if it would be possible for you to kind of email co-ops maybe further afield based on what you're looking for, and just say like, hey, I'm here and I'm interested. But yeah, that it's always nice when people get in touch and they're not just looking for a job, and they don't just want to, you know, get paid and not really be bothered about what they're doing. There's a lot of communication stuff at Outlandish which has been really helpful for my job. I think we've gone through quite big changes since I started. So when I started at Outlandish, it was the kind of chief organizer was just about to go on maternity leave, and I was covering her for 6 months. So my first 6 months of Outlandish were quite, were probably like not the same kind of introduction that a lot of other people had, because Abby, the kind of organizing person, wasn't there. So, and it also coincided with the time that the company had a lot of money, which we gave away. And then later on, we had to lend money back to the business because we had no money. So we learned that we shouldn't give all of our money away. But there were definitely, which I'll be, you know, I want to be really open and honest about. lots of things around power dynamics and just power in general, and some people feeling like comfortable to do things that other people weren't, and, you know, kind of different varying levels of autonomy. And so in order to address that, we have tried to spend a lot of time thinking and talking about that internally. And this is stuff that I think I would just love to see becoming more normal in other organizations. I think that lots of companies say that they're trying to be good, but for me, it's like when you ask the least powerful people in the business, like, do you feel like you have autonomy, or are you comfortable to raise issues? That's the most telling thing for me. And I think I probably think that because there was a time when I definitely didn't feel that power, or didn't have that power. So a couple of ways that we've addressed that are using something called sociocracy. There might be a couple of jargon like klaxons going off, and if there are, then like let me know, but I'll try and explain it as best as I can. So sociocracy is basically a kind of process or kind of framework that uses kind of like 3 pillars. The first is consent-based decision making. Consent-based decision making is different to, I think what a lot of nice organizations do is they want to make sure that everybody agrees. And when you have like 4 people and you say, does everyone agree? Then you can get the people going like, well, not really. And that's totally understandable, because you're kind of like pinpointing stuff too much and you're getting too granular. The way that I usually describe consent-based decision making is it kind of flips it on its head and it says, does anyone disagree? Which is a really different, it's kind of, there's a different mindset behind that. And you can be like, well, no, I don't disagree. Like, you don't necessarily agree, which is fine, but you don't disagree. So there's kind of philosophy behind consent-based decision making is, can you consent to what is happening? There is a mantra which is good enough for now and safe enough to try. So, you know, it might not be the way that like Lauren would specifically go and do something, but Lauren is like okay with what's going to happen. Like, does it meet the end goal? Yes. Is it going to be detrimental to the business? No. So then it's worth giving a go. And, you know, all of us might have different ways of going about something, but the point is that there's an onus on just like moving forward rather than talking about a decision for 6 months. So the way that kind of works on a practical basis is brought through proposals. So one person will make a proposal, and then everything in sociocracy generally works in circles. So you work in rounds, and the idea behind that is that everyone is given the opportunity to speak, and that kind of speaks to a dynamic around people just, you know, like being in those kind of meetings where you've got the usual suspects speaking up and like voicing their opinion, and then you've got people who have less power for a multitude of reasons that they might have less power, just not really being offered or given space to speak up, or feeling that they can speak up. So that's consent-based decision making. Another thing is around circles. So that's the organizational structure of sociocracy, and it's an alternative to traditional departments in organizations. So like you would be in the admin department, or you would be in the sales department, and whatever else. These circles are open for participation, and ordinarily you'd be member of, at Outlandish, you'd be a member of at least a couple of circles. So I'm a member of like the stuff that interests me, basically. Project management, finance, design. I'm not a designer, but I'm interested in it. So I'm part of the design circle and the people circle. There's always one that I've forgotten, but no one else from Outlandish is here, so I won't feel too bad about that. You can also kind of be part of a circle for a while and then leave, which is fine. And these circles kind of they overlap. So there's a constant like flow of communication between circles, and ordinarily they'll link to a circle in the middle, which would be the general circle, or in our case, the members and Outlanders circle. So it's basically that you don't have to go to all of the meetings, but there's still an opportunity to keep up to date with what's happening. Ideally, each circle would have its domain articulated, so it will be clear what circles are responsible for. And the idea is that those decisions are made in that circle. So you don't have somebody outside making decisions around something that another circular is supposed to be in charge of. And then the kind of third element of sociocracy is just making small changes, and kind of in keeping with a digital kind of like agile project management approach. It's just like making small changes and iterating, like testing them out and then making it better and learning from it rather than implementing a big change. So proposals, when you're making decisions, the idea around them is just to make something better, and it doesn't have to be a huge change. So that's that jargon out of the way. We've also done a lot of work around feedback, around things that are kind of like reframing conflict. And that's one of the things that interests me most, is about like the culture that we get to co-create within cooperatives. You know, we get to decide how we run our business, basically. The things that interest me are around like, is there kind of oversight or like shared values? Is there a way to feed back to people? Is there like, what is the professional development that is in place? Is there an anti-racism policy? Like all of these things that for me contribute to a healthy organization. It can be really difficult, I think, to implement those things, because as cooperators, we're like running the business and like delivering the work. So finding space to do these things is quite difficult. And I think it can be easy to kind of like relegate them a little bit. But for me, those are the most important things. Like if you don't look after each other and like the workers, basically, there's no point in delivering what, you know, you could be delivering life-saving services to people, but if you're not practicing it from the start, then for me, like, I just can't believe in it. And that might be a difference among Outlandish, and I think that's absolutely fine. It's a very personal thing. I think just from a personal perspective, like a lot of the challenges that I have found have been around unlearning things that I had previously learned in, like, even from school or being employed in other places. So this kind of like, I think there's something that can be really scary about just being given freedom to do what you want. And we do have a lot of freedom at Outlandish, that basically if it gives value to the business, you can do it. And I remember at the start, I was like, what does that even mean? Like, I can do whatever I want. And I think it's quite a privileged space as well. So it's not something that all of us are used to, but it's something that I have like struggled with in terms of kind of being motivated to make changes to my own role. But I try and push myself to explore stuff that I think I might be interested in. Also just unlearning hierarchy as well. Like, after I'd been at Outlandish for a couple of years, and I just still wasn't really, I don't know, maybe like convinced is the wrong word, but I was just a bit like, I really don't think that this, I never describe us as flat structure, because I don't believe in flat structure. I think unless you're like all the same people, but I think that we strive to be flat structure. But I realized that, so basically I was kind of introduced to this theory around power under and power over. So powering over someone is around, like, you know, holding someone hostage would be a clear example of that. They have the power over you, whereas power under would be like, I'm allowing you to hold me hostage. And I think I was definitely powering under sometimes, where it was like kind of easy for me to be like, oh, you know, like almost like giving my power away in a little bit, in a sense, where it's kind of scary taking power as well. So I've been trying to work in the past couple of years around like taking power and holding my space when I feel comfortable to do that, and it's a work in progress. Not having a manager to tell you to do what to do like every day or every week, whatever, is also great. But at the start I was a bit like, oh yeah, no one's actually going to check if I did my work. That's weird. So I think the kind of challenge that brought to me was like being motivated and doing the things that that I said I would do. I'm like really going full disclosure here, so I hope that's okay. I think also like there's a balance to that, which is moving away from this kind of capitalist corporate nonsense of just being productive all the time, I have given up on that and I'm okay with it. Like I used to have a real need to be productive, and I think part of it was to like prove my worth as an employee and like prove my worth as being part of Outlandish, but it's just not possible. So like yesterday, I had some family stuff going on and I was just able to put work to the side and was like, I'll just do it later. Or, you know, like last Monday when I was just really not feeling work, like I lay on the sofa for a couple of hours and just tried to not, what I would have done previously was just stare at my computer for hours and still not have done the work, but just been in front of the computer. And I know that that's not relevant to everybody in terms of like having the freedom to not to work when your colleagues are, or, you know, not deliver stuff on the exact time that you said it you would. But I have tried to create a space for myself where I'm okay with it, because I think a lot of the time I used to be so worried about like, what's going to happen if I don't deliver something? But what's funny is nothing, unless you've got like a particularly urgent, you know, but I'm obviously talking like within reason here. Yeah, I have definitely talked for too long. So that's where I'm at, peeps. Is there anything that I've like missed and you're like, no, you didn't talk about the thing that I'm here to listen about? Or, you know, is there something that I said that doesn't make sense or that you disagree with? Like, I'm totally open to conversation.
You could tell us, yeah, quickly about Space 4, like the actual environment in which you work and the kind of story behind that.
Yeah, so this is kind of connected to having a lot of freedom. I think Outlandish is a really good example of trying to explore the benefits of being in a cooperative, in the sense of it's our business, it's our money, we can do what we want with it. And we obviously we come to those decisions using consent-based decision making. So although there have been times where, you know, some people have like signed off budgets just because they thought they could. I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but I'll bring it back, I promise. So Space 4 is a good example of this. We're based in Finsbury Park in North London. We were walking past our office was on the top floor of a building, where on the first floor, it was just kind of like one of those spaces where people would just come and go all the time. And there was this really weird thing of like this pyramid scheme had been set up in the first floor and had like really like high level security and like loads of 18-year-olds walking around in three-piece suits. Like, it was just weird. And none of us really knew what was going on until in the summertime they'd leave the door open and I would hear them say, just give us £5,000 this week and we'll give you 20,000 next week. And I'd be like, they're lying, and then like run up the stairs because they were all quite muscly. But basically those people disappeared from like one day to another. And so there was this space that was just left empty, and we were on good terms with the landlords, and they were like, yeah, these people just left, like we don't know what to do with the space. And we were like, we'll take it, not really knowing what we would do. So we started a co-working space called Space 4, with a kind of focus around cooperatives and people who are just working in positive, you know, like projects that will have a positive impact on social good in some way. None of us at Outlandish had any experience of what it was to run a co-working space or set up a co-working space. Luckily, somebody connected to Outlandish did, and she was looking for work. She hadn't started one, but she'd been in a co-working environment and kind of an event space environment before. So she started to work with us. It started off really, really slowly, like having like two or three desks in a space that could accommodate like 40 desks kind of thing. But we were assured that was normal. So we just kept going at it. You know, we were able to invest a bit of our money in it up front, which we know is privileged to be able to do that. But eventually we started to kind of bring people in from the wider network, host events there. Then we had founders and coders that needed a new space. So they're a coding school like that have 13-week cohorts. So they wanted to take the space, and little by little it grew out of that. And then basically we started to just have really amazing people around. And it also became apparent that there were no physical spaces for people to come and learn about working in co-ops, to be in a kind of cooperative environment. So Space 4 was the first in that sense. And then kind of, you know, when Preston were doing a lot of the community wealth building stuff, they would come down and try and learn a little bit about it, because they were like, this is exactly what we need. Like, we need a place where people can can understand what it's like to work in a cooperative rather than a kind of theoretical approach. And a couple of years into it, Islington Council invited us to bid for a new space that they had bought the lease for. So basically they could see that there was a tangible benefit to the community of having Space 4 around. So at one point we did have 2 Space 4s, although probably luckily we've gone back down to 1 because the old building is going to be redeveloped and sold to rich people. But it's just a really great space where you can use it for pretty much the same as what it was set up for: events, come in and use the desk for a day, hire a meeting room, go and study with founders and coders for 13 weeks. But because of the environment that you're in, there's always also like a shared lunch on a Wednesday, so you can hang out and speak and understand, you know, who's about. If you're a developer working on a project and you need a designer, there's probably a designer in the room that you can collaborate with. And then people who are studying at Founders and Coders also have the opportunity to stay in the space once they've graduated and learn how to set up a co-op or go and work at a co-op. So I think we've had like 5 or 6 cooperatives that have been set up by Founders and Coders alumni, and usually stay in the space so that they then become part of the community. So Space was pretty cool. If you're ever in London, come and have lunch with us.